I am Valerie Morgan, 42 years old, former Chief Strategy Officer at one of Chicago's largest financial firms. After 15 years of dedication in a meeting lasting less than 10 minutes, I was fired right before the board of directors. They called me dead weight from an old era. I just smiled, pulled out a USB drive, and left the room with a sentence that silenced everyone. Have you ever been looked down on right where you sacrificed your entire youth? Silently holding everything together only to be discarded as if you never existed? If so, leave a comment, share your story, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Because what they thought was the end was actually just the beginning. I once believed that loyalty and hard work could protect me from every storm. That if I persevered, worked quietly without complaint, the company would value me as much as I valued them. But I was wrong, and wrong from the very first day I stepped into Westfield's office as an administrative assistant, holding in my hand a declined MBA withdrawal form from Columbia University just to keep this job. I remember that day clearly. Winter of 2007, Chicago was bone-chilling cold. Lena was only 4, sleeping on a bench in the hospital waiting room because I couldn't find anyone to watch her. I had just taken an hour off work to bring her to the doctor for a cough. When I returned to my desk, my lunchbox was gone, and on the table was a short note from my manager. Next time you're late, don't come back. I stayed silent. I needed this job. I stayed, accepting everything. The disdain, doing others' work without recognition, unpaid weekend shifts. Then came 2008, the financial crisis pushed Westfield to the brink. Only 6 people remained on the floor. Everyone was preparing to be laid off. I took the initiative to write a risk analysis, proposed restructuring the investment portfolio, and sent it straight to Mr. Gerald, the CEO at the time. I didn't think he'd read it. But he called me in the next day. Do you know you just saved $18 million with 3 pages of paper? He said, eyes both surprised and cautious. From then on, I was transferred to the strategy department. No one believed an administrative assistant could understand risk models so well. But what they didn't know was that I had studied nights for 2 years at community college, read finance books every night after my daughter slept, and even did MBA homework during lunch breaks. 6 years later, I was the only person summoned to an emergency room for an important merger deal with Eastbridge Capital. If the deal failed, stock prices would plummet disastrously. I stayed up 3 nights straight, reconstructing the detailed asset adjustment between both sides, finding the break-even point that could convince both boards. The deal succeeded. Stock price doubled in 6 weeks. I was appointed Chief Strategy Officer 3 months later. They held a small party with wine with flowers, but the only thing I remembered was missing my daughter's first junior high class picnic. Lena never said it aloud, but I knew she felt disappointed. I always told her that everything I did was for our future. But maybe all she needed was a hug at the parent meeting, not a growth report. There was one afternoon I can't forget. It was Lena's high school graduation day. I promised to be there, bought flowers, reserved a front row seat. But then an urgent call from Mr. Gerald pulled me into a negotiation room with the Asian leadership team, who were threatening to withdraw capital. I couldn't refuse. I just texted my daughter, "Mom is trying for you." When I got home, Lena was sitting on the stairs. Her graduation dress still on, eyes red and swollen. In her hands was the bouquet I never got to give her. "Did you know they called my name but no one came up to take a picture?" she asked, voice choking. I stood silent. In 10 years negotiating with so many directors, I had never felt so helpless. "Everyone has someone waiting downstairs," Lena added, turning away. "Except me." I went to my bedroom, closed the door, and didn't cry. I didn't allow myself to cry. The next morning, I was back at the office at 6 a.m., revising the next quarter's strategic plan. They called me the Iron Woman. But they didn't know. Every night I could only sleep after seeing my daughter breathing peacefully in her dreams. My life was a series of silent sacrifices like that. No one in the boardroom that day ever asked how much I had given up to keep them steady. No one asked what I traded to keep the deals from collapsing. They only remembered that I was the old guard, no longer fit for the tech future. But what they never understood was I didn't need their recognition. I only needed a chance to prove that what they discarded was the foundation their empire stood on. And when they took my title away, they inadvertently made me something they couldn't control. A threat no longer bound by silence or loyalty. Because I gave them everything. And now I'm ready to take it all back. I once believed Daniel was the only safe place amid the storms of my career. We met at an intellectual property seminar when I was chief strategy officer and he was a talented lawyer newly hired from New York. Daniel wasn't like the men who had passed through my life. He was gentle, attentive, always stood by me in meetings where my opinions were dismissed because they didn't come from the technology department. There were nights I stayed up late editing merger presentations. Daniel silently placed a cup of coffee beside me without a word. I thought if there was any man ready to walk with me to the end of the road, it would be him. We kept the relationship secret not out of fear of gossip, but because we both understood that emotions were a luxury in the corridors of power. But some days I noticed his eyes no longer looked the same. Later calls came later at night. Morning kisses became hurried. I told myself it was just work pressure. Everyone had exhausting days. We were fine. Until one evening I accidentally discovered a printed email in the project files Daniel asked me to review. It was an exchange between him and a company named Balance Holdings, a small company virtually unknown in finance circles, but preparing to license software strikingly similar to the system I had developed over 3 years. At first I thought I was mistaken. But when I checked shareholder information thoroughly, my heart tightened. Balance was a subsidiary funded by a private equity firm, and its CEO was none other than Blake Travers. And the entire patent file for the software was listed as legal counsel transfer by D. Shaw. I held the documents, stood silently in my office as the white light above blurred the words. At that moment I realized nothing was accidental. I wasn't eliminated because I was old. I was eliminated because I was a threat to a premeditated plan. That night I said nothing. I still had dinner with Daniel, still smiled as he talked about the office, still sat next to him on the sofa where we usually watched movies on weekends. But inside me was a growing void, as if every beautiful memory between us was now covered in dust of betrayal. The next morning I arrived early at the office. I asked my assistant to check document editing logs on the internal system, and discovered that 3 weeks earlier, Daniel had used his legal access to back up the entire source code of the software I developed, which I never uploaded to the company system because it was still being tested on my personal machine. I had shared early drafts with him, trusting he understood the importance and risks. But I had trusted the wrong person. I saved all the evidence and encrypted it on a hard drive locked with my daughter's birthday. I didn't know if I was more scared or colder at that moment. I only knew that from that second all the feelings I had for Daniel were no longer whole. A few days later, preparing to leave the office late, I overheard Daniel's voice on a call. He stood in an empty meeting room near my workspace, back to the glass door. His voice was low, confident, but chilling. "Don't worry about Valerie. She's not a threat anymore. She's just sentimental clutter." I stood frozen. Those last 3 words stabbed my chest. Sentimental clutter. A woman discarded just for being too emotional. I used to be proud of my compassion, of putting people above balance sheets. But in their eyes that made me weak, unworthy of the world they were building. I didn't enter. I turned away, each step crushing the shattered pieces of trust one had built over a decade. That night I sat by my desk, reopening every line of code, every presentation, every email I had sent, every improvement I had handwritten in my notebook. I did not cry. I did not get angry. I quietly gathered myself back together, the pieces of a person they thought was shattered, but who was actually just waiting to be rebuilt in a different way. There was no room for regret. No place for deceit. I would say nothing to Daniel. I would say nothing to Blake. I would let them be confident that they had won. Because only when they let their guard down could I step in. And then I would not ask for love or recognition. I would demand the truth. And the truth always finds a way to speak. I left the office later than usual that day, carrying an old leather bag containing a hard drive, handwritten drafts, code printed on scrap paper, and a stack of documents I had never dared to reveal. When I stepped out of the elevator, I didn't go straight home but turned left, walking against the wind toward the suburban train station. Tonight, I needed someone I trusted absolutely. And that person was Clara Jenkins. Clara had been my dorm roommate during a short intellectual property law course in 2005. Later, she became one of Chicago's top technology lawyers, specializing in complex cases involving copyrights, patents, and contract disputes among major financial firms. We kept in touch, but not frequently. I always kept Clara away from the dangerous parts of my work because she was the last person I wanted to drag into the treacherous world I was trapped in. But this time I needed her. I arrived at Clara's apartment around 8 p.m. Her penthouse was on the 16th floor, overlooking the river and the brightly lit buildings of the Loop. Clara opened the door with her hair tied up, wearing a loose sweater and thin-framed glasses slipping down her nose. Seeing me, she didn't ask anything, just tilted her head. "Are you hungry?" I shook my head, stepped inside, and placed the bag on the mahogany dining table. Clara fetched wine, poured 2 glasses of Pinot Noir, then sat down across from me, eyes fixed on my face. "What's going on, Val?" I didn't answer immediately. I pulled everything from the bag, laying them on the table. Technical notes, data maps, photos of system logs, software interfaces with lines of code marked with my name and creation dates. A triple encrypted external hard drive. And finally, a sheet with email content between Daniel and Baylance. Clara slowly sipped her wine, her gaze shifting from curiosity to coldness. She started up her computer and plugged in the hard drive without asking further. Her hands worked swiftly as if she had done this all her life. I sat quietly, feeling as if I had placed my entire past and future on an operating table. After a moment, Clara looked up, voice lowered. All this source code was created on a personal operating system, never logged into the company network, never synchronized with any Westfield servers. Everything is time-stamped and linked to your IP. There's proof of the original device. Val, this is legal evidence. Clean. I nodded. I worked on it on weekends and evenings. On my personal laptop. Not a single line touched the company network. I took precautions but didn't know why. Clara silently stared at me, then asked softly, "What do you want from this? A lawsuit? A settlement? Or just your dignity?" I didn't turn away or pretend to hesitate. I looked straight into her eyes. "I want the truth. But if it burns a few things down, let it burn." The room was silent for a while. Clara set down her glass, leaned back, and exhaled slowly. "Then we'll start with the legal foundation. First, I'll send an official notice to Baylance demanding all activities using this software stop immediately until ownership is verified. At the same time, I'll prepare a claim for patent infringement damages if they continue commercial use." I was silent, absorbing each word like cool water during suffocating days of betrayal. Clara continued, "I also need evidence of when you shared ideas with Daniel. Emails, messages, memos. Anything that proves you trusted him personally, not just as a colleague." I handed over my phone, opened my personal archives folder. "It's all here. Even the message where he said he would help protect my ideas from the new board." Clara skimmed through, then slowly smiled. "How ironic. The one who was supposed to protect you is the one who stabbed you the deepest." I gave a bitter smile. "He didn't kill me. He just killed the last trust one had left." Clara sat upright, her eyes now sharp as steel. "I'll call the legal team tomorrow morning. But Val, I have to warn you, once we start, there's no turning back. Are you ready for how far this will go?" I didn't hesitate. "As far as it takes." Clara nodded. "Then stay here tonight. No contact with anyone. No email replies. Tomorrow we rewrite the rules." I sat silently by the window, watching the city lights flicker like cracks shimmering in an old tower. I once thought I was the foundation. But now I know, I am the architect of everything they are trying to steal. They want to turn me into a memory. I will show them I am the present. And the future. Nearly 2 weeks after the night I met Clara, everything began moving at a speed I never expected. The lawsuit was filed, the cease and desist notice was sent to Baylance, and the first email from an unknown address appeared in my inbox with the subject, "Still remember who kept the system running?" The sender was Thomas Wu, former head of data architecture at Westfield. He was fired 6 months earlier for not adapting to the company's new strategy. The man had stayed up 3 nights straight with me during a data crisis, rewrote the entire integrated information system within 48 hours when a server failed right before the IPO. He was one of the very few I trusted completely. And he had heard the news. They were still watching me. I replied with just one line, "Detroit. Next week. Address attached." 3 days later, I sent 5 more emails to 5 names I never forgot. those who were the silent pillars behind every Westfield success but had been quietly removed under Blake's leadership. Some were pushed out for excessive personnel costs. Others resigned because they couldn't bear the toxic atmosphere spreading through the company hallways. I rented an old warehouse in East Detroit, a former auto parts factory, now converted into workspace for small startups. I chose that place for its privacy, its distance from Chicago, and perhaps because it reminded me of what once made America great: sweat, resilience, and a quiet belief in change. On Monday morning, they began arriving. The first was Leona Mitchell, former head of product, a strong, sharp-minded black woman I once called more guts than 10 Blakes combined. Leona walked in, still in her leather jacket, and said immediately, "You're really doing this, Val?" I nodded. I need people who know the game isn't on paper, but in every line of code, every number, every forgotten person. She smiled. Then I'm in the right place. Next came Thomas, carrying a laptop, technical sketches, and a stack of revised data architecture maps. Then Rachel Flynn, former chief operating officer, always seen as too blunt to be executive, but the only person I trusted to bring every major project back on track. Jonah Larkin, head of customer experience, pushed to a subsidiary for not adapting to digital transformation, walked in with silent but determined eyes. Angela Torres, former risk analyst, called too conservative, hugged a stack of analysis reports she'd kept since leaving, and said quietly, "I knew this day would come." And then the last one, who made me freeze, Eli Burns. Eli was a special figure. He never talked much, never joined social chats, but knew the financial operating system like the back of his hand. He left Westfield a year ago after refusing to join a senior personnel overhaul campaign planned by Blake. Everyone thought Eli was just a senior analyst. But I knew he was the nephew of Charles Burns, founder of Westfield Equity Group. Eli walked in with his usual look: simple button-down shirt, round glasses, and a thin leather folder tucked under his arm. But his eyes were different. Calm, observant, and full of knowledge. "Valerie," he said, shaking my hand with a firm grip, "this is the first time in a year I felt like I've walked into the right room." I looked around. 6 people, 6 minds who had once managed billions of dollars each quarter for a company now drowning in complacency. Each had their reason for turning their backs on Westfield. But now they sat around the table, silently waiting for me to speak. I took a blank sheet of paper and drew a simple circle. I don't want to build a company just for revenge. I want to create a platform. A financial system that isn't built on greed, but on performance. On transparency. On people. Leona nodded. "What's the name?" I paused, looking at every face in the room. "Vanguard Streamline." Jonah raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a journey." "Focused." "And pioneering," Thomas added. Eli leaned on the table. "I agree. But we'll need more than ideals. We need clarity, what the product is, who the first client will be, and how far we're covered legally." I turned to Clara, who was joining via video from Chicago. She spoke up right away. "I've completed the legal entity structure. Vanguard Streamline will be an independent organization, with full protection of Valerie's intellectual property. We've got the legal side. The technology, that's on you." Angela opened her laptop and began presenting a risk analysis system integrated with AI that she had once tried to pitch at Westfield, but was never approved. Rachel immediately suggested how to streamline the operations process. Leona proposed a new customer interface. Jonah broke down user behavior from archived data he'd held on to. I didn't need to say another word. The room turned into a self-running engine. And in that moment I understood, this was no longer a counterattack. This was a declaration. Quiet, but louder than any PR campaign Blake had ever orchestrated. I stood up, placing my hand on the cold surface of the table. "We don't need to bring down Westfield. They'll collapse on their own. Our job is to be ready when people start looking for the exit." I woke up Monday morning in a small hotel in downtown Detroit. The early light slipped through the curtains, casting warm streaks of orange on the wall, a soft reminder that the game had shifted. I wasn't rushing like I had for the last 15 years. No need to prep a board report. No need to check Blake's schedule. No dreading a meeting ruled by cold stares. I had only one task: open my laptop and click send beneath the press release I'd written 2 days earlier. No flair. No exposition. Just one concise message powerful enough to shake the financial world. Valerie Morgan, alongside former strategic leadership members from Westfield Equity Group, officially launches Vanguard Streamline, a new financial platform focused on transparency, high performance, and professional ethics. The core technology was developed independently and is fully and legally owned by the founding team. We thank Westfield for the years that served as our home and stepping stone for this new journey. Not a single line mentioned my firing. Not one word targeted Blake or Westfield. I didn't need to strike them head-on. I just had to let their silence face the noise of the market. Within 30 minutes of sending it out, my phone started buzzing non-stop. The first call came from Denise Altman, investment director at Ridgepoint Partners, the biggest client I'd worked with over 8 years at Westfield. Val, I just read the news. Is Vanguard Streamline real? It is, I answered calmly, steady voice, hands still on the keyboard. We're moving our entire portfolio to you. Westfield lost direction long ago. I just need to know your operating team is the same. They're all here, I said. Ready. 15 minutes later, I got an email from the CFO of a major energy conglomerate, where I had once successfully negotiated a $300 million credit package. Then 3 more calls from other strategic partners. 5 names I had hoped would follow me now confirmed. They were leaving Westfield. And they weren't going alone. They were bringing trust, data, and long-term contracts. Rachel walked into the temporary conference room, set down a hot cup of coffee, eyes fixed on her screen. CNBC just picked it up. They're calling it the most powerful retreat Wall Street's ever seen. Thomas tapped the table, still trying to process. Feels like we just shot them straight in the heart, without even touching them. I looked around. Leona was already talking to the media team. Angela was analyzing Westfield's stock reaction. It was starting to dip. Jonah was managing the new client onboarding portal. Everyone had their role. No one asked me what to do. They knew. Eli stood by the window, phone to his ear. The call lasted less than a minute. When he hung up, he looked straight at me, half serious, half relieved. The Burns Family Investment Board just officially pulled out of Westfield. $78 million. I said nothing. No applause. No celebration. Because those who've been cut out of the boardroom know one truth. Real victory doesn't come when someone falls. Comes when you rise up and build your own table. Less than 2 hours after the release went out, major outlets began posting headlines. Valerie Morgan returns, leads Vanguard Streamline, old team, new mindset. Westfield faces serious challenge, from quiet to thunderous. One woman's power move shakes the market. I got a text from Clara. The legal brief is circulating internally. They'll respond. But response won't be enough anymore. I didn't need to read all the articles. I just needed to look at the faces of my team. For the first time in years, they were working in a space where voices weren't silenced, where honesty wasn't a liability, and where being different didn't mean being dismissed for not fitting a PR narrative. And I knew. This wasn't the knockout. This was just the alarm bell, triggering a panic that would come faster than they expected. Because when the ones called too old, too outdated, or too resistant start speaking truth, the people who once ignored them finally realize what they lost. My phone rang around 3 p.m., while we were on a video call with 2 new West Coast investment groups. On the screen, the caller ID flashed, Blake Travers. I didn't answer. Let it ring 3 times, then hit decline. A minute later it rang again. This time it was Daniel. Then came a flood of texts, short and frantic, from both of them. The tone shifted quickly from commanding to pleading. I need to see you. Valerie, we need to talk. Just us. This is a misunderstanding, we can fix it. They're going crazy. Blake's getting grilled by the board. Please, Valerie. Meet me tonight. Geneva Hotel. 5th floor meeting room. I set the phone aside, looking toward Eli, who was presenting system performance analytics on the new platform. He paused when he caught my eye. It's starting over there, I said quietly. Just as expected. Rachel looked up. Blake. I nodded slightly. And Daniel. No one asked what I planned to do. They trusted I knew exactly what the next move would be. That evening I arrived at the Geneva, a luxury hotel nestled in the heart of the city, where politicians and top executives often held discreet meetings. I wore a charcoal long coat, my hair pulled back neatly, carrying a small black bag and a calm, cold composure. The fifth-floor conference room had soundproof glass walls, a polished walnut table, soft warm lighting, and a faint cedar scent in the air. Daniel was already there, seated at the head of the table, no tie, hands clenched around a glass of water so tightly his knuckles were pale. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," he said as I stepped inside. "I came because I want to hear what you have to say," I replied, pulling out a chair across from him. Daniel stared at me for a moment as if waiting for some sign of softness. But I let him see nothing but an unwavering silence. "Val, I messed up," he began. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. Blake pressured me. He wanted you to sign the ownership transfer agreement. You remember? The one they claimed was just an internal form." "I never signed anything like that," I interrupted. "I know," Daniel said, almost whispering. "But Blake needed it to legitimize the brand before selling the software stake to Balance. They staged a fake meeting, printed the agreement. And I forged your signature." The room fell silent. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small USB drive, plugging it into the laptop on the table. The screen displayed a video less than 2 minutes long, pulled from internal security footage, archived by the surveillance system in the executive meeting room at Westfield's headquarters. The angle was high and clear. In the video, Daniel entered the room alone. A folder sat on the table. He looked around, checked the audio recorder, then picked up a pen and signed a sheet labeled Intellectual Property Transfer Agreement. After that, he took out his phone, snapped a photo of the signature, and sent it. I said nothing. I let the video play through. Daniel couldn't look directly at the screen. When it ended, I removed the USB and placed it back in my bag. "I have the original," I said, along with verified confirmation from the building's tech and records teams. "There are also access timestamps, IP addresses, and system log entries. You didn't just break civil law. You committed a federal crime." Daniel sank back into his chair, breathing heavily. "I was forced. Blake said if I didn't do it, he'd push me out. He has leverage on me from the auxiliary fund audit last year." I raised my head, voice steady. "And you thought betraying me was a fair price to keep a temporary title?" Daniel didn't respond. His hands balled into fists, jaw trembling. But I felt nothing anymore, just emptiness. "I didn't come here to hear your excuses," I said, eyes locked on him. "I came to confirm that you understand what you did. And that you know this doesn't end in this room." "I'll do anything to make it right," Daniel pleaded. "I'll testify. I'll expose Blake's entire plan. He's planning to sell client data to a third party. I have recordings." I stood up. "Send them to my lawyer. And prepare to speak with federal prosecutors. From now on, everything you say will be recorded." I stepped out of the room. But before closing the door, I paused, turned back to him one last time. "You had everything, my trust, my loyalty, and a chance to stand on the right side. But you chose cowardice. And from this moment on, I owe you nothing." The door closed behind me. Instead, I felt no anger. No hatred. Only clarity. And it was remarkably light. 3 days after the meeting at Geneva, Clara officially filed a lawsuit in federal court for intellectual property theft, forgery, and unauthorized use of a proprietary financial technology system I had developed. The case file included every piece of evidence: video footage, system logs, time-stamped edits, and Daniel's own confession, who in the end had no choice but to cooperate to reduce his exposure to criminal charges. The news hadn't even reached the press when the market reacted. That morning, Westfield's stock opened down 3%. By noon, the drop was nearly 9%. Things got worse when major financial outlets published summaries of the lawsuit. Headlines flooded the internet. "Wall Street rocked by IP lawsuit. Does Westfield really own its platform? Valerie Morgan and a 3-year hidden truth." I didn't feel vindicated. Just quiet. A quiet so deep it settled like still water inside me, as if all the chaos outside was just an echo from a battle I had already left behind. By late afternoon, I received an email from Clara. It had only one line: "They broke." Attached was a file. I opened it. It was an internal memo from Westfield's board of directors. "Westfield Equity Group announces a change in leadership structure. Blake Travers and Mr. Daniel Shaw will no longer hold executive roles at the company, effective immediately. The board is working closely with federal authorities to clarify all matters. We extend our formal apology to Ms. Valerie Morgan for the serious mishandling of intellectual property and the reputational harm she endured. We sincerely recognize her enduring and invaluable contributions to Westfield over more than a decade of service. Rachel read the announcement aloud as I walked into the office. Everyone paused, silent for a few seconds as if waiting for my reaction. I simply sat down, removed my glasses, and said calmly, "They didn't say a word when they pushed me out. But now, they call it a mistake." Thomas gave a small laugh but couldn't hide the bitterness. "A mistake is pressing the wrong button. This was a whole plan designed to rob you blind." I didn't reply. My emotions floated quietly beneath the surface, like ripples in a deep lake, disturbed only momentarily before returning to stillness. A moment later, I opened my inbox. Dozens of messages flooded in: congratulations, encouragement, proposals for collaboration. But I stopped at a short message from an unfamiliar address: emily.tran@westfieldgroup.com. "Morgan, I'm Emily. I was hired at Westfield 4 months ago. I had heard about you from former colleagues in operations. I applied here because I believed in the values they said you built: integrity, competence, and kindness. Today, I officially submitted my resignation. Not because I've lost faith in the industry, but because I know I can't stay in a place that treated you that way. Thank you for being who you are. I hope one day I'll get to work under you, next time in a better place." I stared at the words on the screen for a long time, as if they were reaching into the deepest part of me I tried not to touch. I imagined a young woman fresh out of college, full of energy, once believing she had joined a company worthy of her dedication, and realizing it's rot in just 4 months. "You're still a role model for so many," Leona said as she set a warm cup of tea on my desk. "Not because you fought back, but because you stayed true to yourself." I didn't say anything, but I knew the thing that brought me the most peace wasn't Westfield's collapse. It was that, after everything, I got to witness people like Emily, the next generation, learn to rise, to choose. And if I could be a part of that awakening, then all those years of being underestimated weren't in vain. That evening, as night fell over Detroit, I stepped out of the office, the early autumn wind brushing through strands of silver in my hair. I carried nothing but a small handbag and a soft smile. Sometimes, justice doesn't arrive with a gavel in a courtroom. It arrives when people choose to walk away instead of staying silent. When they send one simple message: "I believe in you." 4 months after I sent out that first press release, a photo of me and the Vanguard Streamline team appeared on the cover of Forbes. Beneath the bold headline, "The Women Who Rewired Wall Street," was an image of me standing between Leona and Rachel, light catching one side of my face, my eyes no longer weary like they were at Westfield, but glowing with a calm, earned clarity. When the editors requested an interview, I gave them only one condition: none of us are side characters in a revenge story. We're at the center of a new way to lead. They agreed, dedicating 10 full pages to the feature titled "Ethics, Performance, and the Overlooked: A Formula Redefining Finance." Vanguard Streamline had signed strategic partnerships with 3 major banks: Midland National, Boreal Trust, and Riversouth Capital. Each institution had undergone post-crisis restructuring and was searching for a fintech model that was both agile and secure, something our system delivered not just through technology but through people. Angela led risk management, rebuilding reporting procedures based on behavioral patterns rather than raw data. Thomas completed the AI interface that forecasted market volatility in real time. Rachel trained a new team of young analysts, including Emily, the same young woman who had once emailed me. Now she sat at the second desk by the window, no longer keeping her head down like on her first day. We were no longer a team of castaways. We had become the new standard others were beginning to emulate. One Friday afternoon in early March, I received an official invitation from Harvard Business School, asking me to speak at their annual Leadership and Financial Innovation Summit. The letter read, "Your career is proof that core values can lead, not at the cost of humanity but through it." I read that line over and over and something inside me softened. I texted Lena, "Are you free next Wednesday? I'm giving a keynote in Boston. I want you in the front row." She replied almost instantly, "I'll skip class that day. And I'll wear a white blouse, just like you used to tell me for presentations." That night, I opened my closet and ran my fingers over the navy blue blazer I wore during the biggest merger presentation in Westfield's history. I hadn't worn it since I was fired. But now I didn't see it as a reminder of loss. I saw it as part of the road that led me here. The auditorium at Harvard Business School glowed under white lights. More than 200 people filled the hall. Mostly MBA students, investment advisors, and fintech professionals from across the country. I stepped up to the podium with microphones ahead and a large screen behind me that read, "Leading with Integrity, a conversation with Valerie Morgan." I scanned the room. In the front row, Lena sat upright, hands resting gently in her lap, eyes following every step I took. She didn't say anything, but in her gaze I saw something deeper than pride. It was trust returned. I began not with statistics, not with headlines, but with a question. How many of you have ever been told you're too soft to lead? How many have stayed quiet just to avoid being pushed out? And how many have believed that, in order to survive, you had to lose part of yourself? A few hesitant hands went up. Then more. I let the silence stretch, allowing everyone to feel the weight of that shared moment. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, stayed loyal long enough, I would be recognized. But recognition doesn't come from erasing yourself. It comes when you walk away and rebuild a value system no one can take from you. I shared the story of the system our team had built, not as a miracle but as the result of years of persistence, neglect, and then more persistence. I didn't shy away from the betrayal. But I didn't let it become the centerpiece. The centerpiece was what we did next. When I finished speaking, the audience rose in applause. A man in a gray suit came up to shake my hand. A young student asked for a copy of my speech. But the first person I saw after stepping down was Lena. She came to me, wrapping her arms around me tighter than any hug I could remember. "You didn't miss it," she said, voice quiet but certain. I held her close, then stepped back slightly, placing both hands on her shoulders, looking at her long and deeply. "And I never will again." Amid the applause, under the stage lights and the smiles of strangers, I didn't feel like I was standing on a pedestal. I just felt like I was finally standing in the right place, beside those I loved and no longer needing to trade pieces of myself to stay there. After all those long, scattered years, I realized that victory doesn't lie in proving yourself to those who once dismissed you. Real victory is in letting go of burdens you no longer need, and carving a path for the next generation, one that doesn't require them to fight the battles we had to just to survive. I chose to step down from leading Vanguard Streamline and pass the reins to Clara Jenkins, my trusted friend and partner from the earliest days of the legal battle. Clara was a thoughtful, sharp leader with a deep sense of empathy and a clear connection to younger voices. She wasn't just brilliant in handling complex legal landscapes. She knew how to build a workplace where innovation and humanity lived side by side. She was the one to lead Vanguard into its next chapter, shaping it into a beacon of progress and sustainability. As for me, I embraced a different role. I became an advisor to the younger team, helping them develop the strategic projects I once only dreamed of. I also began writing my first book, sharing the journey of loyalty, betrayal, and, ultimately, resilience. I wanted to offer what I'd learned not just to executives, but to anyone navigating hardship in work or life. I also accepted a part-time teaching position at a local college, where I could speak directly to young students. Sessions that weren't just about business models, but about listening, connecting, and reinforcing the idea that human worth comes before market metrics. I remembered the long nights, the relentless days, the moments I had to miss in Lena's life because of deadlines and deals. But now I didn't have to strain to survive a hostile environment. I had created something new, a place where people could thrive without compromising themselves. Lena, the same girl who once sat in the front row at Harvard, had grown in so many ways. Every time I looked at her, I saw parts of myself: steadfastness, curiosity, and the desire to make a difference. I wasn't missing the important moments in her life anymore. I was walking beside her every step of the way. One time, while we were walking together in the park near our home, Lena asked me, "Mom, do you ever regret choosing this path?" I smiled and answered, "Not once. Every challenge I've faced helped shape who I am today, and helped me become the mother you deserve." As the sunset slowly faded across the sky, I looked toward the wide horizon, heart full of gratitude. I was once called a burden, dead weight, in a world that made little room for the older or those who stood out. But in the end, I realized I had been the anchor holding an entire empire steady. My story isn't just about revenge or personal triumph. It's proof of the power of persistence, of integrity, and of believing in yourself. I built it, I left it, and I rose above it. And now I stand here not to hold on to the past, but to open a future full of promise for myself and for those who will follow. My journey may not be the same as yours, but I believe all of us have faced moments where we felt underestimated or left behind. I'd love to hear what you think about the choices I made, the way I navigated through those challenges to find my own voice. Have you ever faced something similar, where you had to rise up to defend your worth and what you believe in? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I truly want to hear your story so we can learn from one another, grow together, and inspire each other. If you'd like to keep walking this path with me to hear more stories about life, family, and the people who shape us, don't forget to follow the channel. The stories to come will carry even more meaning and unexpected turns, ones I believe will reach your heart just like this one reached mine.